Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'll call the East Lyme Board of Selectmen special meeting for budget to order. Those that can, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Cunningham, would you lead us?
Yes. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, tonight is our emergency, basically all our emergency responders, first responders and so forth here to make the presentation. Wasn't it a week ago tonight, our first responders were doing something else?
Monday night.
Oh, it was Monday night, so it's a little over a week ago, so.
Week and a day.
Week and a day, so. All right, we'll start off. First on is our emergency management budget. I'm on item 214. This considers our emergency management, which is, this past year especially, or since COVID hit, taken on a very important role, especially over the last couple of months with storms and floods, and obviously all the handouts of the kits and the masks. It's been an extremely busy time for them. So, Chief, are you going to lead off on this?
Yeah, myself and Julie will be.
Okay. If you like, you can come up to the table here right next to Anna. And just make sure the mic is on, and just take us through it, and then for any questions.
So as the first selectman said, this year was certainly challenging for emergency management. We found ourselves in situations that I don't think we ever could have envisioned that we were going to be in. And that was the second year of a pandemic where emergency management was called upon to play a very, very large role. As you know, emergency management in this town has always been operated a little bit differently, where for years the fire marshal operated as also the EMD, the deputy was the deputy EMD, and you had a radiological officer and some other support staff that would be involved. But we've drastically changed how the department is laid out. In addition to being police chief, I'm also the EMD. We've also changed the role of Julie Wilson, who was originally an administrative assistant for the fire marshal and emergency management. That was a role that she was operating far, far outside of. We made her the deputy EMD, and that's a very deserving role for her for the job that she does. She did not do simply administrative tasks. She was really the assistant in that department, and she continues to be a very, very valuable asset for them. The other reason we did that is because many, many of the things through the state, you have to have a title. You can't be an admin assistant and have the authority to attend meetings and do some other decisions that have to be made on the state level. So certainly we welcome the changes that we've made to our office. And moving into the new PD, we certainly are looking forward to being in that new environment inside of the new public safety facility, as you all saw this past week. So inside of the budget, a lot of it is salary driven. Inside of this, as you can see, by reshaping those jobs and those roles. Other than that, we have the norms inside of this budget. We also remember this year we added Everbridge, the Everbridge system. The Everbridge system is the emergency notification system. We're working very diligently on trying to get citizens opted in. The opt-in portion is enormously beneficial, because it doesn't just call someone's home phone, it allows you to have different paths. So your cell phone, your email address, it allows people to opt in for certain types of notifications they normally wouldn't get. So special road closures, weather events, other things that help us communicate with our citizens on a regular basis. So we're certainly hopeful that we can continue that. That is a yearly fee. So this past year we were able to fund it off of the Millstone Nuclear Safety Grant. We will be attempting to, again, get that funded. However, we do have it in the budget this year simply because should that not be approved, we would be faced with having to get rid of Everbridge. So that is a budgetary consideration for this. We wanted to have it in there. Certainly our hope and intention is that we're able to gain funding for that nuclear safety grant. So if we walk through this, again, salary driven. And a lot of this is for myself,
pull it a little closer to you. Yeah,
For
there you go.
myself and Julie, so the stipend that I receive. Is it on now? Okay. The stipend that I receive, the salary that Julie is paid. Now remembering too, she will work, or she has worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if it's a storm. Before, we were paying overtime and comp time prior to changing her role. And now as a salary employee, we don't do that any longer. So certainly it's a benefit to us administratively. Building maintenance, moving into the new building, we certainly should have limits to that. However, we still maintain the radio systems throughout the town, so that includes all of the tower sites, the generators that are present there. They require to be on generator power to be maintained and so on and so forth. And the radio maintenance is for all of our radio systems in the town of East Lyme. That is police, fire, EMS, public works, the school system. Everybody is on radio systems that we are responsible for maintaining that. And the bulk of this expenditure is for utility communications. They are our communications vendor, and that allows us to call them should we have any emergencies, and we have that service contract with them, and that's what that is for. Because being a 24/7, 365, unfortunately many times that Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning is when you have a problem. You need to get the radio people right out here because emergency services cannot be without radio communications. Excuse me. Telephones, moving into the new building. We are consolidating, as you know, the different departments. So that's going to be a wait and see. We're still anticipating a reduction. Unfortunately, we don't know how much that reduction is going to be. So we are budgeting for the same amount for this year. However, I am anticipating we are going to see a cost savings. But unfortunately, until we start getting some phone bills, we're not going to really be able to determine what that savings is going to be. And the reason that is, we're taking copper lines from 2 buildings. We're consolidating into SIP trunks, which are VoIPs. So we're cutting down drastically on the number of copper lines we're paying for. And the SIP services are far cheaper than the Frontier service for those copper lines. So again, anticipating a reduction, but until we actually see it on paper, I'm hesitant to actually start cutting out of that without knowing what that amount should be. And again, training, supplies, going through some of the dues that are paid. Aed funds were moved out of the emergency management budget. That is to pay for the upgrade and the pads and the batteries for all the AEDs throughout town. Also remembering a lot of these lines ended up in the emergency management budget because there was no other place for it, or it was a role that the former fire marshal took on and kind of just added things into that budget, which was combined with his, and if you recall, 2 years ago was taken out of that. Transportation allowance, so for Julie to go to meetings, there's multiple meetings that are required, be Millstone up at their facility in Norwich, or other state facilities and state meetings or trainings. We pay that mileage for her. And then you'll see a pretty extensive breakdown inside of miscellaneous supplies for the items that we require. So, is there any questions on this budget?
Chief, one thing too, did you mention, I had to get up for just a minute, with the conferences and so forth, if you can't make it, it can't be an administrative assistant.
No, and that's right. I said that was the important part
okay.
of the change in her role and her title, because that empowers her to be able to
Okay, none, we'll move on to dispatch, chief? Or do you want to let Dana take this? Up to you.
Dana can certainly join me in this one.
I think she's looking, she's got your back.
Everyone's just going to stay behind me with that. That's good. Thank you.
Okay,
We're doing dispatch?
yes.
Okay. Oh, 250.
So as you're aware, 4 years ago, or 5 years ago almost, because of the change in the status of the police department became responsible for the emergency dispatching functions of the town of East Lyme and overseeing them. That's due to the FBI requirements and state requirements for the criminal justice information that came through there. Since then, we have worked hard to professionalize, and we had very professional people there to continue to improve upon the professionalism of the dispatch center. And with the move to the new facility, that is greatly enhanced, as you all saw this past week. The dispatchers take on a much greater role, a much more visible role compared to what they had before in their previous center. We have worked hard to outfit the center with all of the latest equipment possible. So we certainly are trying to give them the best operating picture that we can. As you all saw, hopefully in an article this past week regarding the fire last Monday, kind of shining a spotlight on what our dispatchers do. We had a structure fire, commercial structure fire with 58 911 calls. And that's not just the only piece they do. They do the 911 calls. And so let's talk about this case, for example, because I think it's important to understand that when we're talking about why we budget what we budget. Taking those phone calls, dispatching services, answering the radio, calling for mutual aid, calling for Eversource, DOT, other assets, making notifications. So the list is tremendous on what our dispatchers have to do, at the same time trying to answer other emergency calls that are coming in at the same time. What we've done in our dispatch center is currently we have 6 full-timers, and right now we have 4 to 5 part-time dispatchers that work and fill in. We've worked hard over the last couple of years to work with the union to change the schedules. One thing in their schedule is they used to work all Monday through Friday and just different shifts. We've changed that to now have them rotating shifts to provide better coverage, to provide more consistency, and we've reduced the number of part-time shifts scheduled each week to 5. So you have full-timers on, all except 5 shifts per week. Now, obviously that's absent anybody calling in sick, being out injured, or whatever may happen. That's the normal schedule. Your schedule right now is from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. You have 2 dispatchers working every shift. 7 days a week, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., you have 1 dispatcher working alone. Certainly that's been a concern of the police commissions for several years now, and for emergency services, because you think about the volume of calls or the services they have to provide. 3 in the morning, and we've had this happen before. We had a structure fire on North Road and an accident with entrapment on the highway at the exact same time. That's a heck of a lot for 1 dispatcher to be able to try to handle at one time, because you have human factors involved, right? They only have a certain capacity in what they can do and what they can answer on those calls and the services. So this proposal in this budget, and this is from the police commission, is to increase staffing to ensure we have 2 dispatchers working at all times. And we can go through a laundry list of reasons why that certainly is beneficial to everybody, but having a second person in there when it literally hits the fan because the phone is ringing off the hook with 911 calls, and sometimes more than one call, more than one incident at the same time. Radio traffic, notifications, remembering they are doing police, fire, EMS, they're monitoring your water systems, they're monitoring your sewer systems, they're working for public works. Every entity that is out there, your dispatchers are working for 24 hours a day. So what we're looking to do is add 2 full-time dispatchers in an effort to provide coverage 24/7 with 2 dispatchers. I think, for everybody, including the police commission, that makes complete sense to do that. It certainly is a goal that we have talked about for several years now, but it's just becoming more and more apparent that it is really a safety issue to not have that second dispatcher on overnights. Too many bad things can happen inside of that center or connected to that, and that communication link is certainly what is going to fall. And again, I'm going to point to that fire that happened, and while overnight you may not get 58 911 calls, but you certainly are going to have similar workload to have to happen. Our dispatchers do a tremendous job. They have a tremendous role, but no emergency services get out there and nobody gets help if they're unable to do their job properly to start. So that is really the reason why you have the largest jump in this budget, is to add 2 full-time dispatchers to provide a rotation in their shifts that we can sufficiently provide 2 dispatchers around the clock. Other than that, in their budget, there are not really many increases. We have a slight increase in training, simply because the training costs for different courses have increased slightly. In uniforms, we went up a little bit because we want to add the 2, so we want to provide them with uniforms, as well as we're trying to standardize, as you saw, when people come to that window, we want them dressing appropriately in uniforms to identify who they are. While it's a high percentage, it's not a enormous dollar amount, and certainly, to outfit them in the proper top to identify that is not extremely costly, but certainly when you're doing it for 6 full-timers, possibly 2 more if we were to be hiring the 2 more, and the part-timers, does have a cost involved with it. So those are the only increases in this budget.
Questions for, and this too, I'll start off too, as I'm very much in favor of over the course of the year, and Chief, you and I have talked about this, of hiring one dispatcher in July and then a second one in January, basically 1.5. And, it gives one up in some training, and it does, looking for some savings going in for the budget, gives us savings in about $28,000. So that's the only comment that I'd like to add. I've worked with the chief on this and told him to, but I do desperately support the need for that second dispatcher on midnights for sure. And in the meantime, until that second one got brought in full time, there's other ways to look to fund that through overtime and so forth. So that's it. Any questions for the chief?
Yes. So, increase in the number of dispatchers, fully support. I've spent a lot of time working rotating shifts, midnight shifts, everything else. It sucks working a lot. You have no change, though, in your part-time and overtime with the added staff. Wouldn't you expect some of that overtime to go down if you had more full-time staff?
Because you're actually adding a second person on. So we're not changing the dynamics of the shifts that have to be filled currently. What you're doing is creating a second need on midnight shift. So the current part-time and overtime would not be affected at all, because what is required today remains the same.
But that new employee is also going to take vacation and be sick and things
Sure.
like that. So wouldn't you increase your overtime because of that?
But you're going to have an overlap too with the 2. So you have 2 people trying to rotate and fill in. So you're going to have also, you should have a corresponding, kind of evening out, because if you look at, you have 7 days a week, let's just that need a second person. If you have 2 full-timers coming on and they work even a 4-2 shift, that's 8 shifts that you have. So you're going to have some flexibility on at least 1 or 2 of the shifts that you may have a corresponding reduction if you could follow that. Yes, you may in the long run have something that would be very difficult today to quantify, because we'd have to look at how those shifts would be booked off and how they stand. But on its face, it should even.
Okay. That's all.
Yes, ma'am.
And Chief, there's the right of first refusal too, so that to me kind of negates, that is by the full-timers, that sort of may keep the part-timers working in the way that they are working, so it's not like they can just jump in always and do.
And our goal too.
Is that another competing issue?
That would balance the part-time, full-time, overtime thing. Right.
But once you add 2 more people, you still have the same overall scenario.
And one thing that we're too, in this, I apologize for not explaining this too, one thing that we're working with the union right now to look at different options for the schedule, one of which does drop the number of part-time shifts per week down. What we're trying to do is we got off of the Monday through Friday 5 and 2. We've created creatively created a working relationship with the union that allows the shifts to rotate. There are some options that are being discussed right now to possibly, if we add 2 more people, to provide that great coverage over the 7 days a week, but also to try to reduce the number of part-time shifts per week from 5 down to possibly 3 or 2, depending on the schedule as we go. So yes, there's work we can do with those schedules, but we can't do it until we know, hey, this is what we're gonna do, because then we have to have an agreement with the union to do that.
And when is that coming up?
We just, I'd probably be the best one to do that. We just have come to a year extension with the dispatchers. So, and,
But they also there's language that we put into their, I think, an MOU that happened probably 2 years ago. That allows us to work with them and have some flexibility, and they've been tremendous to work with on it.
Okay.
So certainly I can foresee,
Yeah.
a good relationship working forward to say what's the best schedule. And they're very interested in doing that too, to provide that extra coverage.
All right.
they were very, and they stepped up and offered, because they knew all 4 union contracts were coming up this year. And they stepped up and said, look, we'll take a year extension and work forward, so. Anyway. Dan and Roseanne?
I'm all set, thank you.
I just would comment that, I fully support having 2 people on 24/7. Anything can happen at any time of the day. And to have one person trying to cope with all those calls coming in. What if there was a fire at 2 in the morning? It's not fair to the person that's sitting there trying to manage all of that. And with, we have Gateway, we have plan unit developments, we have 55-plus communities that we're encouraging. All these entities require services, and we have to be up to the task. So absolutely, we need 2 24/7.
Any questions?
Well, I'm going to take back my time. So if we go with, as Mr. Siri suggested, try for 2, but then one of them starts halfway through the year, does that help you enough? I mean, can you get by with that?
Well, certainly, then we would have to be just creative with the schedule, and quite honestly, what we would have to do is when we brought one on, we would plug that hole for, several days a week, and not make it a policy that we have to have 2 all the time. It would be, we'll have 2 in the schedule. And then certainly when you add the second one, that would actually completely fill that hole. So we would have to be creative with Lieutenant Jezierski doing the schedule to see where are we putting that second person, on that shift. But just simple math, it won't cover all 7 days of the week. It will only cover some of them.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. So if we get the 1 full-timer, then now that means that definitely on midnights we will have 2 people. And then when the halftime person comes on, the middle of the year person came on, then...
No, so if you got the 1 person in July, then out of the 7 days that only have 1 dispatcher right now, you would cover 4 to 5 of those with the second, and then you'd have 2 or 3 that only had 1. When you hired that second dispatcher, that would then provide you your full coverage where you always had 2.
Any others?
Well, I really feel that we need 2 people on that midnight shift. I just think it's a tremendous burden, responsibility for that shift. And I myself have had to call at 3 o'clock in the morning for help. And I just think...
I can be talked into the 2 very easily.
Well, I just think that we're setting ourselves up for a dangerous situation. I mean, the
Okay.
one-time person could have an instant heart attack.
If I could say, I'm of a similar mind. Roseanne, this issue is, when I sat on Board of Finance, it would come up, and the request for adding dispatchers and trying to cover, the middle of the night shift, so to speak. And yeah, for me, it always seemed to be a real need to have the 2 folks from midnight on. So I would definitely support that if we could.
Okay.
Well, I
Lieutenant?
think,
Oh,
just thinking of sitting there and, you're by yourself and you're responsible for the whole town. And what a sense of guilt you'd be left with if you couldn't handle the situation and something really tragic happened. I mean, our people are very dedicated, they're very concerned about the community. I think I just think that I think we should go for the 2 full-time. I'll just leave it at that. I think we're fortunate that nothing serious has happened.
Lieutenant Masick, you had something you want to say? If you want to just step up to the mic there.
Actually, no, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, and does this show the reduction or just?
It does.
Okay. We can, okay. Okay, that's something we would have to do with once we get into deliberations, but I think we've made that clear. Sandy, I'm sure will note that in there, our minutes, that we're what we'd like to see do. Okay, moving on to the police department. Chief, you're still up.
Who's from here?
Who's got your back this time? You got your back.
Chief Taylor does. I've distributed packets to you with an overview of the police department. I think it's important to, as we talk about the police department as the overarching agency for many of these budgets, have an understanding of what the police department is and what it is. And I think, we as a society have a thought of what police departments do and what they are, and sometimes that thought is a little skewed from what actually happens. So just to kind of go through what we are very briefly, and I have some bullet points put together here to enhance our discussion. But understanding that we, as a police department, are responsible for the safety and security of all the residents and visitors to the town of East Lyme, a population of 18,693. And again, we also know the amount of visitors that we get to town, to the beaches, to the shops, to the parks, significantly increases that population, especially in the summer months. It's not accounted for in any of the documentation, but certainly we recognize it as the police that are out there in the field. Our current staffing is 26 full-time sworn officers, and our minimum patrol is 1 sergeant and 2 patrol officers, responsible for 34 square miles of land in this town, as well as many miles of coastal waterways. Our staffing is 1.85 per 1,000 population, and the Connecticut state staffing rate on average is 2.58 per 1,000 population. Now that includes support services, dispatch, animal control, and coming to that number. The reason as I point that out to you is certainly important when we look at where we compare. Last year, the Police Commission set forth with a staffing proposal in their mind based on all of the facts and circumstances that were garnered from state reports and from looking at the statistics in our town to want to get us to a level which is commensurate to what we need to properly staff the police department in this town. And I think there's no question we are vastly understaffed in comparison to our peers in other communities. And when you look at statistics and how we determine that, we are policing with far less. Doesn't mean we do a lesser job. It means that we are a lot of times behind the 8 ball when we're responding to incidents and those calls. Because I want you to envision, as we talked about dispatch, but as your police department, it's July, it's a Saturday, it's 5 in the evening, and you have 1 sergeant and 2 officers policing your entire town. That is a daunting task because they're busy. They're going call to call. They're going to domestics. They're going to things that require more than 1 officer to respond to those calls, or traffic accidents that require more than 1 officer. I just point out the structure fire we talked about this past Monday. All your police officers in town were tied up to well past 9 p.m. that night. So any calls for service had to be just shelved and wait to have somebody come out till after that. So when we talk about staffing, we've also recognized that we drastically need to increase, and the Police Commission has set forth last year with a proposal to add 2 police officers per year for a 6-year period. Last year, that was reduced. The year before, it was reduced. So certainly, we are again behind the 8 ball a little bit in getting that staffing up to where it should be. When you compare ourselves to our contemporaries around us, again, the town next door is the same population, same town size, and they have 49 police officers to our 26. So when you look at what we're able to do and we're able to accomplish, again, it is working with far less. Below that, you have a hierarchy chart that shows how our organization is set up. And myself as chief of police, we have the 2 lieutenants, which I will say probably the best thing the Police Commission has done in my time here is to put 2 lieutenants in this department. We have found that is vastly needed, especially with the police accountability bill, the new policies that have to be created, working through what we have to work through. It certainly has been advantageous to us. We have 6 patrol sergeants, 13 patrol officers, a school resource officer, a federal task force officer, 2 detectives, and on the admin side, we have an ACO, assistant ACO, we have our dispatchers, and we have 2 records and admin personnel. And that is the makeup of your current police department. If you turn to the second page, you'll see our statistics for 2021. 16,647 calls for service, 1,870 motor vehicle stops, 187 traffic accidents, which is always a goal of ours to reduce the traffic accidents, especially reduce the serious injury accidents, which I think we've been highly successful in accomplishing that. 241 arrests in 2021, which was a 28% increase over 2020. 34.7% increase in criminal investigations over 2020. And in January this year, having just done my report for the Police Commission meeting on Thursday, we are in January recognizing a 135% increase in January 2022 over January of 21. So crime and calls for service and every matrix has definitely increased. One important thing, and you know, while I want to say that we do more with less, the clearance rate of your East Lyme police officers, according to state records, not our own, is 40.57%. Clearance rate means that we get a complaint and we are able to come to a conclusion and make an arrest on it. The state average is 16.75%. So your officers are, I'm sorry, but are performing way outside the box here. What they're doing with less is certainly more. And I think that that should be applauded in the work that they do. However, the problem is that that's investigations. Where we're behind the 8 ball is when we have calls for service. When you have those incidents where it takes 2 officers, but the 2 officers are tied up and you don't have a backup. You don't have someone to respond to a call, or they have to wait, they have to triage it. Those are the things we're looking to avoid. So the matrix of crime is certainly something you can utilize to say, we have crime that's going up. And it's not just East Lyme, it's society, and it's the state of Connecticut, and it's everywhere that crime is going up. But that's not the only matrix to look at. You also have to look at your ability to patrol your town. And I want you to, again, think about that with 1 sergeant and 2 officers. The incidents that you see happen or maybe know happening, or you have a domestic, you don't have the people to respond to those calls. And again, we still get it done. Please don't get me wrong, we're always going to get it done. But the extra person or 2 people on a shift, the value is tremendous. And one thing that the state got rid of, unfortunately, was the Dui Grant, and Roseanne and I talked about this prior to this meeting. That used to be a benefit. Friday and Saturday nights, we have an extra patrol officer on there. Yes, they're working DUI grant, but they're also out there in the community to serve as a backup and respond to calls if they have to in emergency situations. We no longer have that. That's been eliminated from us getting that state grant. So certainly that's an issue. Technology. Many of you or all of you have been involved at some point over the past couple of years with our discussions on technology. And we have become a highly technology-driven department. Everything we do is with technology, and we've increased that technology. We've changed the CAD RMS platform, which is records management system, and the CAD system. We've gone to a new platform. Scheduling software. We've gone to a scheduling software which allows us to remotely have officers fill shifts. No longer do sergeants have to sit back with a book flipping through pages and pages and pages to fill an overtime shift or a road job that comes in or a pull down. It's all done through apps and technology. In-car tablets, we've increased that to, what does that do? It gives officers better capabilities out in the field to get their work done. In-car cameras and body camera systems already paying tremendous dividends to us as a department in getting that done. Evidence.com cloud-based storage. This is a tremendous thing that we have because it takes all of our video as well as our case management at times and puts it into the cloud system where we can make files, we can make groupings of all of our evidence, all of our documents, and it's there. And if an attorney needs it, we can send that link to an attorney or the state's attorney's office or share that for FOI. So it's increased our efficiency and capabilities with that. Power DMS software allows us to do all of our policies and put them into that function. It also allows the academy, when they do their accreditation and they do their, they remote into our system. We don't have to no longer have site visits. They don't have to get electronic versions. they can go right into our system and see our policies. As well as Attorney Daigle's law firm, which I'll jump down to the bottom, we're currently working to standardize all of our policies through Attorney Daigle, and the goal of that is accreditation, is the CALIA National Accreditation, to make sure that our policies are on a national standard. And also our new building. And Aed Grant, which we just received from the state, which is pass-through money, but to upgrade every computer inside of our building. So at the end of this time, we are going to have brand new technology, the best technology, and the best ability to have our officers do the most efficient job possible. Now, all of that makes it easier, but we still need the staffing out in the field, and I think that's an important piece of it. So, the Police Commission, in their budget proposal, in their staffing proposal, has asked for 2 officers per year, and this budget is including that, is looking for 2 officers. I think if you look budget-wise, in the staffing portion, we have my raise, you have staffing increase proposal, and it still is at a 3.41% increase only for that one. Now, what do we do with staffing? Why does it benefit our department? So currently we talked about most of those shifts having the 1 sergeant and 2 patrol officers. Adding the 2 officers increases the coverage by 1 for 10 shifts per week. That will impact 520 out of 1,095 shifts per year. And having that additional officer on that shift provides you additional coverage to have another officer responding to calls. Another officer available should 2 officers be tied up at a domestic, and you still have 2 more to go to an additional incident. So your capabilities are greatly enhanced, not just to do that reactive policing, but also proactive policing. To do motor vehicle stops and enforcement in certain areas where we have residents that are constantly asking for that enforcement, or seeing speeding, or we see speeding. If we're behind the 8 ball, we can't proactively work. We've talked about this every single year, and we're trying to get better and more efficient with that. But certainly the staffing is a big piece of it. Officer safety, citizen safety is greatly enhanced with better staffing. And again, I want to point out, adding 2 officers doesn't mean you have a tremendously enhanced police force. It gives you 1 extra person on 520 shifts per year. Now that single person, again, functions as an extra officer to go to calls, but also, in the long run, helps buffer maybe some of your overtime. Because if you have 4 officers on that shift and 1 books off sick, well, now you don't have to fill overtime because you haven't hit your minimum threshold. We want to be above minimum threshold, that's our goal, but one of the caveats, or one of the benefits of having the extra officer, is the ability to buffer some of those overtime assignments that now you would have to fill that on overtime if somebody was sick. So that's another benefit. So again, there's a tremendous amount of benefits, and then the last part is just basically a breakdown. Each month in my monthly report to the Police Commission, I put a section, East Lyme Police in the News, things that have been covered. I think are, that's important. It's important for residents to see. It's important for people in your positions to see the incidents that are happening, what's being reported, because unfortunately a lot of people, if they don't see it in their backyard, they don't see it on their street, they don't understand or realize what actually happens in the types of crime or activities that occur. So that is the department as a whole. So now if you want to, we'll go through the major areas of increase. One of the things we all know, the facility is the facility fee that we're paying Waterford is completely eliminated. This past year it's been limped along, not knowing what time or what part of the year we'll be moving in to where we are. We're hopeful, I knock on wood and Anna knocks on wood, that we're able to start housing prisoners sometime in the very near future and cease paying Waterford the fee that we're paying them. Again, my salary was increased part of my contract. If you recall, for 4 years of my first contract, I was 15% plus below every other police chief. So really the town of East Lyme got about an $80,000 savings over those 4 years because I worked far below where I should have been. The new contract brings me to the middle of the pack for other police chiefs. But I will say, if you move down the shoreline, I'm still 30,000 below some of the other ones. So I'm certainly not, it is right in the middle of the pack of where the other police chiefs are in that salary. Going down the line some more, longevity is just a slight increase, even though it's a large percentage. Police officers, adding the 2 police officers was a 3.4% increase. Longevity goes up, and Anna can maybe speak more to that, but certainly based on officers and how many years they've been here and when they hit that mark inside of the contract. Going to radio maintenance, there's a 40% increase. That's only because in order to hire 2 new officers, we have to outfit them with portable radios, and that is to purchase those 2 radios, which right now are running about $2,000 each. So that is marked by that increase. Boat storage and maintenance, you have a 12% increase in cost and needs. We are recognizing that the 2 boats that we have to provide maintenance for, the regional boat with Waterford, certainly has more and more repairs as it ages. Our skiff, which is a beneficial second boat and one that we use fairly often, does have a brand new motor that we purchased off a grant this past year. So the maintenance needs are going to be pretty consistent with that. But shrink wrapping, things such as that, certainly the cost has gone up for those type items. Professional expenses, a 27% increase, but that's simply the cost of the 1033 program through the federal government to get surplus goods. There's a membership enrollment fee that we have to pay every year. So again, it's a high percentage, very low dollar amount. Boat fuel, we went up, and this is a guess estimate. We went up 20% because we all know the cost of fuel has increased. So certainly there's no way to really forecast, especially marine fuel. The mariners are, we all know, much higher than your gas station on the street. So we're going to have to pay a higher premium amount to fuel that boat. That's shared with Waterford. So it is a sharing where we actually purchase the fuel, and then Waterford reimburses us for that. Uniforms, there's 11% increase, and that is simply the increased cost, but also to outfit 2 new officers. If you hire a new officer, outfitting them in a uniform is about a $3,500 venture to get them fully outfitted to start. So that is the bulk of that cost. Training supplies, there's a 25% increase. That's to finalize a project that we have to employ less lethal tasers to all police officers. When I came in, we had a situation where some officers had tasers, some shared tasers. Certainly not the most ideal situation. We've changed that. We've gone into a program with taser to replace the tasers we have. But we're also increasing the numbers, ideally so all officers have one assigned to them. You take better care of that. It's a better honed equipment, and it stays in better working order if you're not handing it off each and every shift. Plus, right now we have some of our younger officers that are certified in taser, but they don't have one available to them all the time. So we want to change that and make sure they have that. And that was something we discussed last year, and we partially funded, and this should get us there today. Also, this line provides for the 2 new officers, if they were to be hired, a taser, a firearm, and a body camera for them. If you remember, when we went to the body camera program, we got enough for what we had in 2 spares. We want to maintain 2 spares just in case something breaks or is damaged and the time period it takes to replace that. So each officer has to have a body camera, but also a license for that. The licensing fee, as I think we all know, anything to do with computers and electronics, there's a licensing fee, there's a fee to access into the evidence.com, so all of that is captured. I want to make sure that if we hire somebody, there's no hidden cost, that we know the cost of everything going forward. Towing and evidence, there's a 100% increase in that, and that was because of the addition of having to destroy evidence. Prior to this past year, or a year before, Covanta was owned by the COG, and we didn't have to pay as a community to utilize their services to destroy evidence. That has changed. Now we are charged a fee. So this is to pay for twice a year to go in there and incinerate evidence that the court has deemed destructible. So that's that 100% increase in that line. And testing and accreditation, there's a 69% increase. That increase, though, is simply to pay for the CLIA accreditation. Right now, we're working with a law firm, the legal firm, to get our policies up to speed. We're anticipating that by July, we'll be on the path during this fiscal year to pay CLIA to start the process of the accreditation, which is a first-time fee that we have to pay to go into that. Then they start the evaluation process of evaluating us to determine if we meet the criteria for that accreditation, and we work with them over a several-year period. So those are the increases in our budget, and certainly more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Bill, you want to start again, and we'll work it?
Okay, I didn't understand you were under a 4-year contract, and that's why you've got the bump now to make up for those years and stuff like that, so I had some notes in here about that. Hiring the new officers, I've understood for a number of years we need more officers. The movement afloat now to decrease the number of officers and increase social workers and things like that, are you working towards any of that type of effort?
Well, we're definitely not working to reduce officers. We're so far behind the 8 ball with the number we have, but we certainly are, looking, and the state is looking at studying the ability to work better with social workers, or more with social workers. We have to understand the town of East Lyme, again, behind the 8 ball with a lot of things, but most towns that are doing that have social services department for the town. They have very active social services departments, where we have one where we just hired somebody to work with youth services. We work with mobile outreach. We work with other organizations. We're trying to send more and more officers to critical incident training to become CIT officers to be able to better deal with those situations. We're also working with the state in their evaluation of how effective that program will be to incorporate social workers into the police department. I'm absolutely in favor of, as an addition to us and as a tool, working with those agencies. But we have to get there ourselves to get the proper staffing out there, and the town of East Lyme, I think, has to work hard to get those agencies up and running for the town itself, because I think that's an important piece that you can't just say we're going to work with social workers if there's no social workers in town to work with.
Okay. I understand that I don't completely understand how that whole thing's going to end up, but as long as I know that there's conversations to try to figure.
And again, we've taken part with the state. Part of the police accountability bill is the state is studying the feasibility of all of that and how that's going to work. Some towns, Groton Town, for example, went out because they have a very robust social services department in town. They've hired a social worker to work with the police department. I think that's a great idea to do, and we work very closely with social service agencies, but we don't have one that's embedded with us, and certainly we'd be more than happy to have that conversation to see how do we get something like that that's effective for our town.
But that would be an additional head, that wouldn't be replacing one of you
No,
talking
because
about
I don't think anywhere the model is being shown that it replaces police officers. It enhances the ability to respond with those people.
Okay.
But again, I want to point out, the towns that are doing it, especially around here, it is the town's social services agency that is providing this. We don't have that here in town to provide, so we're behind the 8 ball with doing that. I think that's something we need to examine as a community as a whole.
Okay. I think. All right. The fuel cost increase, are you working with the fleet, right? The Department of Public Works has got the fleet fuel program that they provide.
This is marine fuel, so this is Adam Marina
Okay.
filling up there, so that wouldn't come into play.
Okay. Because the fleet price is actually going up twice this. So this might be, this might be in a conservative view at 20%.
Maybe, you're absolutely right. Like I said, we took a guess at doing this. It may not be, right?
Okay. I think you answered all my other questions. Thank you.
And do you have any?
Yeah, just a couple, and then I can move on. So, lots of changes with the Police Accountability Act, more testing and accreditation requirements. So, but we're responsible, the town is, for paying for these. I mean, any other avenue for payment for those items at all? Anything on the horizon?
No, not that I'm informed of, and I've had conversations with Representative Cheeseman and Senator Formica and others in the legislature, and I don't see that on the horizon. I do know that there's conversations, certainly in this legislative session, about addressing some of the issues in police accountability, none of which I've heard involve making it any cheaper for the towns, but maybe just changing some of the language and some of those requirements. But.
And with respect to your legal fees, because you need to navigate the new legislation and do it correctly through an attorney, perhaps a silly question, but is the town paying for that, or is there any other source of funding for that?
Well, there's no other source of funding, and what we've done is to retain the attorney who's working with our policies. We have an estimate of approximately $25,000 for the entire policy revision.
Okay.
We broke it down where we paid 12.5 this year, 12.5 next year. And that's really what their estimate is to get all of our policies up to where they need to be for that standard.
Okay.
What line item, is that a line item?
It's not in our budget, it's
Okay,
actually
because I
something
couldn't
Anna
find
can
it.
answer, it's in the legal field.
So it's in general.
Yeah.
Okay, so that will be in the general government
Yes.
side of the budget, thanks, okay. And just a couple of other things, hang on a second. Maybe where narrative wasn't following, yeah, I think you, Bill answered the question there, or posed a question about the fuel. There really is an increase, and I think your narrative spoke differently there. And same thing with, actually maybe not, with 313 uniforms. So I see that the uniform amount requested is $45,975. And then you mentioned that it's about $3,500, maybe $3,800 according to your narrative each for the 2 new officers. But if you look at your previous amount, I'm just wondering if this number's gone up enough. I mean, I couldn't follow narrative and the number.
We put in for 2 new officers last year, so it would
Okay.
have been consistent inside of, it wouldn't be an increase
Okay.
of that amount, because that was in last year's budget as well.
So that number never changed
I
in
think,
last year's
I have to look back to see
budget?
if when they cut it back to 1 officer, if it was reduced.
Okay.
So I'd have to look at the difference between that.
Yeah,
But
because there was a little discrepancy between what was asked and what was described. You actually asked for less in a way, if it's for going back in time. If you look at the 41,000,
We're asking for 45. But
Right,
I think
and then
it
the
was reduced
45.
by 1 last year, so that would only, so if you follow, if it was
Yeah.
reduced 1 last year, because we asked for 2 officers,
Okay.
and it was just reducing, it's increasing $3,800.
okay, so this is all assuming that we didn't change that number, I guess.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, we can check on that, yeah, just to double check, okay. That's it for now,
Okay. Dan?
move
Yeah, just a
on.
few things. Of the 241 arrests that were in 2021, how many of those would be custodial where they would actually be in a lockup for
The-
24 hours?
The majority of them would have at least passed through the lockup.
Okay.
As far as the bond issue, I don't have that stat in front of me. Certainly, I think when we really took a hard look at it last year, and I did have the numbers, and I apologize, I don't have them with me, but when we looked at how many we held overnight,
Yeah.
you probably were talking 20-ish, for a weekend or extended periods of time. However, we all know that we have no control over that. It's a
Right.
court set bond, it's a domestic that, the bail bondsman puts a high bond on it, so we may not have control over that, so the numbers are sometimes difficult to navigate. But I certainly can get the full details of
Wait,
how long and
The reason I asked, I'm looking at the prisoner expense line item, and we've got $5,000 in there. Do you think that's maybe more than we need, or do you think that's?
I don't know, and
You don't know?
that's why it's there to kind of be a guide. I went with the amount that some other like-size agencies had
Yeah.
for it. Certainly we are going to be creative when it comes to, the meals, and we're going to look at that as we're having them to see how many, what is the rate that we're actually paying for the meals for prisoners. Paying for disposable blankets or pillows or things that we have to have in there, looking at the best, deals possible to get those items. But I think the meal is going to be the big piece, is making sure that, we're tracking that and seeing, okay, we're running very low or very high. And, unfortunately, we don't have the metrics to know and what we're going to be utilizing for that, because there's so many variables that come into play, especially when you talk about overnight or weekends. If you have somebody for a weekend, you're doing a whole hell of a lot more meals than somebody who's just a one night or a couple hour guest.
Right. And you don't have experience having a lockup until now, so
Right.
you'll have a better sense
Sure.
in years to come. As far as the tasers go, so is the goal to have every officer, patrol officer equipped with a taser?
Correct.
Is that-
Yes.
And will this budget accommodate
Yes, it
that?
will.
And the other thing is, adding the 2 officers, that will provide roughly, in round numbers, 50% of the shifts then 500 over we'll have 3 officers available
Correct.
on those shifts.
Right.
And I'm assuming there's studies and optimization of what shifts are probably more likely to benefit from having 3.
So
A Friday night is probably.
And we look at, unfortunately, with the rotating shifts, we can't always look at the day of the week. We can look at the shifts, and we can look at the rotation of those shifts when Lieutenant Jaworski does the schedule to say, where are we going to, not make the officers bid, but officers bid a shift to work. And then she will make a determination of so many will work this shift, so many that shift. Most likely, you will see those officers on the evening shift, because the evening shift is your busiest time. So you certainly want to make sure that the 4 to midnight shift is going to be higher staffing than the other shifts, because simple call volumes and number of responses is going to be higher during those calls. But we're going to do that by looking, we have the ability in our CAS system to break down by hour and see where are our highest number of calls, and then effectively put those officers into the best position in those shifts.
And maybe this isn't a budget question, but if you're in a situation and you need more officers than you have, do we have mutual aid, or can you call someone
Certainly.
out?
Mutual aid, unlike the fire service, which calls upon mutual aid regularly, in police services, mutual aid is your last resort. And certainly we have agreements, and certainly work very closely with our partners all around us. But it's not something we can rely upon on a constant basis. But yes, absolutely, we've done it in this past year alone. Waterford comes here to help us. We've had Lyme a couple times, and vice versa. We're going to those communities to help them. It's just not something, we have to plan for ourselves. And
Right.
Certainly if we weren't planning for ourselves and saying, well, we're not going to have officers because we know we can get mutual aid, well, they're going to be less apt to be able to provide that or want to provide that.
It raises a host of issues,
Sure.
I understand that, but I worry about the safety of the
Nope.
officers.
Again,
Is there a backup plan?
We have amazing relationships with all our surrounding departments, and they're there in a heartbeat if you need them, and vice versa for us.
Thank you.
Roseanne?
As a follow-up to that, what is the current availability of the state police for assistance if needed?
They're there. They're spread thin. I think, as all of you have seen over the years, their numbers have dwindled. So if you look at Troop B, for example, you have one trooper that's responsible for East Lyme to New London on the highway. So it's really dependent upon where they are. But certainly we've called for assistance from other agencies, and the state police have responded to help us, and again, vice versa. We're going on the highway to assist them all the time. We're going to help Troop F and Lyme, frequently. So it is a mutual relationship where we help each other. But again, state police are spread thin as every agency, but I think maybe they're a little bit thinner than some of the others.
Well, along with my question about the DUI grants, which I understand, as you told me, that we don't have enough criminals to be able to get.
We don't have enough. We haven't had enough DUI arrests to maintain them giving us the award. Correct.
But now I have learned that the state is eliminating those altogether.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if it might be appropriate for us as a board to talk with our state senator and state representative to see if we can't get some of this reinstated.
Okay.
Just a thought. Vehicles. We'll be seeing that in another budget.
Yep. So, well, our vehicles are all self-funded, so that comes out of the purchasing plan for the town.
Right.
When they purchase the vehicles, we, as every year, ask for 2 vehicles. However, the payment for those vehicles are self-funded through our budget. Through the road construction funds, this started several years ago. The taxpayers do not pay anything for the police vehicles. Everything for the entire equipment on those cars and the cars themselves are funded through road construction dollars. So what we bill Eversource, Frontier, the construction companies, that's what funds the vehicles for the police department.
Okay, so I was wondering why I didn't see it here. My recollection was in the past it had been under the townwide acquisition
Yes,
of vehicles. So you'll be looking for 2, you'll be acquiring 2 new vehicles
Correct.
this year.
Yes, and that provides the rotation we need to keep the miles, the miles down on those cars. Now, we're approved for 2 this year. As everybody knows, the global shortage for chips has drastically reduced the ability to get cars. We have one that's in the queue right now, one which is
For 14.
okay. So we have them coming, but we're already, to the second part of the year, and we're just starting to get the ones that were approved, in July. So we're shopping hard now to say, if we're approved for this year, what do we get and where do we get them? Because everybody's scrambling to get those vehicles because they're not readily available. So, which will have an impact on your fleet.
Okay, so that, now I understand why we weren't seeing income from arrests and things in this budget, because income from extra duty, or what do I want to call it, not extra duty, but roadside duty, that is now, all that money is now going towards vehicles.
It is. Well, not all of it, no. So there's a fee that's charged for the vehicle, specifically for the
Yes.
car itself, and that's going. If you turn to the second page, I'm not sure if you have it on yours.
The breakdown.
I did a breakdown of all of the revenue our department receives, because I think that was something that wasn't necessarily always captured. But for our department, into the general fund, we received $90,234 in revenue. For the police vehicles and equipment, we have $90,983 that's received. In the fuel reimbursement, this is an important piece too. We reimburse Public Works for the fuel. So out of the $25 an hour that we charge for that vehicle, there is a portion that is peeled off and given to Public Works, because it is only fair to do that, because they're incurring the cost of running the vehicle. So we're paying for that fuel as well. So estimated outside jobs, we're getting $93,863. And if you look again, where we're getting, our funds that are going back to general funds. So our department makes $90,000. The other piece that I didn't really point out to you, which is important, is my salary is reimbursed $50,000. So unlike other department heads throughout your town, which you are paying 100% of the salary off the taxpayers, for my salary for emergency management and police chief, we're getting reimbursed $50,000 this past year. That will increase with the increase in my salary, because it's based on a percentage of what what I'm making. So certainly there is a deference a little bit where you're getting money back, where again other departments and other department heads you're not getting paid back for. So
Thank you, I did not realize that. The Police Accountability Act, this probably isn't the forum, but at some point I'd like to have you come back to this board and explain to us what effect this is going to have on the town policing.
Certainly.
I noticed in particular on, I think it's the last page, 336, the testing and accreditation, and then the LEA. Is the LEA going to help us with this processing for the psychological exams? Things?
I'm sorry, Roseanne, is it what?
The Law Enforcement Council pays for membership and yearly dues, but it provides recertification training and as well as examinations, promotions, and specialized units. So is that going to be of any help to us in reducing the cost of this testing?
No, it doesn't. So the LEC provides our recertification training for officers, as well as any promotional testing for, let's say we're promoting somebody to sergeant or lieutenants or detective. But their main goal is the training for your recertification as a region. The testing required for the psychological testing and drug testing is completely outside of their purview. That is something that we have to do through a licensed psychiatrist, which is a list that's provided to us by the Connecticut Police Academy, and drug testing. Nothing the LEC is involved in or takes part in.
Okay, so now, Kayla, is that assisting us in this process?
Well, we're paying them. So CALEA is the national certification for law enforcement accreditation. It's a national standard. It's a national organization that is paid. The police accountability bill says specifically that it has to be CALIA certification for your accreditation. So we don't have a choice in the matter. We can't shop around, and they have a set fee that they charge departments to become accredited.
Okay, so for consistency, is every officer that has to be tested for this going to be tested by the same psychological examiner?
The same practice. So we are going to be sending 5 officers per year and it is termed in our union agreement a wellness visit. So really it's just to make sure the officers are doing okay, to check in about their mental health state and how well they are. We are working with East Lyme psychological to do that testing. Dr. Randall has set up a program for us, and again, most will be her. I can't say if an associate of hers will do any of the examinations, but it will be through that that agency.
Well, I'm glad that it's a local agency that has a sense of the community as well. Let me see, I think, the towing. If the police have to tow a vehicle, we're paying for it? They don't get fined and have to pay?
It depends on the reason for the tow. Sometimes we're towing because, let's say, a car was involved in a fatal accident, or let's say the car was seized for a crime. We pay for that tow bill, and if you look at the revenue, I'm very adamant, we bill insurance companies, we bill people, but we can't always guarantee we're going to get paid back for that. So there is a corresponding revenue sometimes, especially in a fatal accident. The insurance companies will generally pay for that tow because we have to impound that car. Where you may not get a payback is a situation where somebody's arrested for a crime and we tow it and seize that car and take it as evidence. If it's towed to Guy's Auto or Furman's because it's just under suspension unregistered, we don't pay for that. But if we're taking it to the PD impound because we need that for a criminal investigation, then we're paying for it, and then we may seek reimbursement if we have an avenue to do so. But unfortunately, many times, if it's a stolen car or involved in a crime, you may or may not get reimbursed for that tow.
Well, this is certainly very, very thorough. I appreciate the information. It's always good for us to learn more. I think this board, including our last Board of Selectmen, is very supportive of the police, and hopefully the Board of Finance will be a little more cognizant this time around than they were last time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now the questions, moving on to the meat of this whole thing, would be the ACO. This should take, what, 45 minutes?
Animal control officer generally is a fairly lean budget. After, I just want to make sure I point this out to you. After we presented this budget, we did have a request from the animal control officer to seek changing the current part-time officer to a full-time status. That is not reflected in this budget for the presentation, but I would be remiss in not mentioning it to the Board of Selectmen. Certainly, there's rationale to it. We are a multi-town agency where you're responding to 2 different towns for a multitude of calls. A lot of hours to be covered. We currently have a very, very good assistant ACO. We went through some times where we had some questionable situations, I think you all recall, where we were struggling with getting coverage for a second ACO. So I just want to say that that has been asked of us, but unfortunately it was right before we came here, not before we presented the budget and put it into paper. So to have something maybe on your radar as a thought of maybe revisiting the agreement with Waterford to say, how do we better construct this?
Yeah, we'd have to do that, yeah.
Because right now, we pay for the officer, we pay for the vehicle, officers, the vehicle. They currently operate out of the New London shelter as a regional shelter, so Waterford no longer has that shelter in their community that they're maintaining. So something to think about. But aside from that part of it, overtime has looking to increase that overtime to extrapolate it to what we were utilizing. And the problem we run into, if we have a situation where the assistant ACO or the full-time ACO is out at all, we have to have 7-day-a-week coverage. And again, we're doing this for 2 towns, not just our town. Anna will bill for reimbursement for overtime from the town of Waterford should there be overtime incurred for call-outs in their community, which their standard sometimes is a little different than our call-out standard. But it's certainly always a work in progress. I get concerned sometimes with ACO because if we do lose a good part-time ACO, which again we have an outstanding one now, we are in a very difficult situation because one person cannot cover 7 days a week for extended periods of time, and there's not a pool of part-timers out there that are available, so that's always a concern of ours. So, do you have anything more you want to add to?
Yeah, so just briefly,
You guys are
Yeah.
So just briefly, I'd spoken with Bob, and looking at this, so I did throw some rough numbers together, but if we do recall, go back a couple years ago prior to the assistant ACO coming on, where ACO Yucknick was working those 7 days a week, I'd actually had to come in with Anna. We had to do a budget transfer to cover, because it quickly depleted what we had in reserve for the assistant ACO at that point in time. Reality is we are coming up to a point where we potentially could lose the current assistant ACO due to outside circumstances, but if we can make this work. I have spoken with the temporary chief over in Waterford. Right now they are receptive to the idea of potentially looking at this further, evaluating it and seeing if it's something that's feasible for both towns to take on. Of course, that extra cost would be divided in half between the two of us. So if I were to give a rough estimate, I would think East Lyme's half of that would be about $35,000. Just based on some rough numbers with benefits and the whole 9 yards. Yeah, that's about it.
So I think it's definitely worthy of a further conversation with Waterford to look at the agreements in place and the staffing long term to see how we want to handle that. But aside from that, the budget is static as it always is. The equipment, the other issues inside of the ACO budget are nominal, and there's no increases for those.
Okay, any questions on the ACO budget?
And the revenue is an offset from Waterford?
Pardon?
The $49,000 revenue is an offset from Waterford, or?
That's correct.
Any other questions? Okay, Chief, Dana, Mike, thank you so much.
Just want to point out, 2 members of the police commission
Julie?
here, so I thank Chairman Price and Commission Member Howard.
Howard.
All right, for coming out and supporting us, and obviously they're, the push or the decision for our budget and especially the staffing proposal originates with the police commission. So I certainly thank them for their support and coming here to support us tonight.
Thank you so much. No, you don't get to leave.
It moves it back.
Oh.
It's higher.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, Chief Barone, you are up for Niantic Fire Department, sir.
Good evening.
Hello.
I don't have quite the elaborate presentation as the police chief did, but I think the biggest item here is we're asking for one more personnel to supplement the force that we have now. Other than that, our other there's $500 in some items that are testing of OSHA expense for vehicle maintenance. We have to go up just for the cost of parts. The fuels are absorbed by the ambulance association. There's a lot of other smaller items that come under the ambulance association. Let me see. Our radio maintenance is just some miscellaneous batteries, although within the next year or two, we are gonna have to do something about portable radios. The Motorola radios that were bought many years ago, Motorola's no longer supporting them as far as fixing them. We'll get by right now, but we had a tough time just buying batteries for them at this point. The OSHA account tests, yearly tests of the ladder truck, breathing air, ladders themselves, and hose. Building maintenance, we do some maintenance, and we also enter into 2 contracts, one with the overhead door company for door repairs, and also we have a venting system that attaches to the exhausts of the vehicles, which was bought many years ago, and we pay a yearly maintenance fee to them. They come in, they change the filters, they do maintenance items. They are an air-operated unit that goes on the vehicle to extract the exhaust when the vehicle is started. It's been a pretty dependable system, and there's usually one minor repair a year as long as they're maintained properly. Training has remained the same, miscellaneous equipment, uniforms. And like I say, the big item is asking for another full-time employee.
Okay,
So
questions
I'd
for
rather have
Chief?
you ask questions than...
Bill?
So I understand the firefighter salary is going up 16 and 18%, whatever, for the additional firefighter. But then your overtime is also going up. So wouldn't your overtime go down if your firefighter went up?
Well, quite truthfully, I'm gonna have to come back and ask for more money this year. This year has been a problem with sickness on both sides, both full-time and part-time. We've also had some training issues where the full-timers have gone and done some training, and that involves overtime. So that figure gets cut every year, and I think, doesn't it go down? It's been cut every year, and for the last 4 years, we've come back for money every year. It also depends on what happens. Starting out this year, I can't tell when an incident's gonna happen. When firefighters get called back, like the other night on Flanders Road, they're initially called back for 4 hours, but that particular call was over the 4-hour limit by the time all of the equipment got put back, cleaned up, Scott packs were put back. Back at the beginning of this budget, we actually had a call back for an auto accident that lasted for a couple of hours out on 156, as well as a couple of fires on top of that. But this year, our big item has been sickness of both full and part-timers. We try to replace a part-time shift with a part-time person. When that doesn't happen, a full-time person comes in and you're paying the overtime rate to staff that station.
Okay, so I think what you're saying is, although the book says that the 2022 budget was basically 10,000, the actuals were higher than that, so the
And-
162.
And what are we tracking right now? This would be a good thing.
So actually, at the end of January, the overtime spend was $93,362, or 85% of the budget. So if you look,
You're going to be close to 150 by the end of the year.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the
I'm hoping that this was an unusual year because of COVID issues, because of sickness issues. I also had a couple guys that had sickness at work and had to work their jobs and couldn't come into work, and I'm not gonna leave the place
No.
vacant, that's for sure.
Understand these numbers are your best estimate, and they're not ever gonna be exactly perfect.
It's a wild card, that is.
Okay, the police department's adding ahead, and they need $2,600, $2,500 for new radio. You're adding ahead. Would you need new radios, or you have surplus from?
I'm waiting to see, I'm talking to a lot of people, we're gonna talk together about that. Last year, when Chief Dwyer was here, they purchased some new portable radios. They still don't function properly, and I refused to pay the radio company some $6,500 because they do not function properly. They have not programmed them properly, and I'm sorry, that's town money. I am not going to pay them for something that doesn't work like they said it was supposed to work, regardless of the amount. They're lucky I paid for the radios. So I don't know what's going to happen. The technology of radios, I can talk to the police chief and see what he's going to do. When these radios that we're still using were bought, that was a town-wide project many years ago. They changed to a different frequency, and everybody got portable radios. They did the highway department, and these have been very dependable radios for us. These radios have taken a beating through water, smoke, fire. When you make something, it has to be fireman-proof because it's going to get thrown, it's going to get tossed. And these have been very dependable radios, so I kind of hate to see them go, but it's like anything else. When something works, they change it so they can make more money at it. So I think that's going to be in a study. We have found batteries to get by for now, so that's going to be in a study.
Okay, and then my last question, your OSHA is going up 14.5%.
Yep.
Flanders isn't changing. Do you have different equipment that's going to have different certs, or I know you don't know their budget and prices?
I don't. I put that in there anticipating a rise. It seemed, I still have some ladder testing to do on one of the trucks. I don't. We put that in there anticipating a raise. I know that labor, some of the testing companies was touchy, especially doing the hose testing, which they did a great job. I can't fault jail on it all. They came in, they did a super job, but I'm just putting that in there, anticipating that.
Okay, that was my only question.
Ann?
Yeah, Chief, just a question about overtime. And the only thing I can compare your overtime expectation or your estimate is to the Flanders Fire Department and your different sizes, so the question may answer itself. But I'm looking at page 2 in it's the first page of the narrative on overtime, and you were talking about unexpected overtime. Maybe 140 hours, and I think Flanders was using 100 hours. Am I correct in that?
Well,
they have 1% on what we do. So they're going off of 5 people, we're going off of 4.
Okay, so just,
if you take the money, the difference, it's about the same.
okay.
Some of that comes to also where you may be out on a call, and now it comes to the end of your shift, and that call lasts another hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it takes to get the equipment back into operation. And some of that is attributed to that. We have an awful lot of calls in the afternoon where shifts start to change, which I'm not certain right now what we're going to do with as far as hours for this person that I'm asking for, but that may cover over into some of that and eliminate some of that, that hour or two that is left over.
There's also one thing.
yeah, so you both need to be at a
If you look at my budget versus Chief Barone's, 2 of the personnel that work in Niantic Firehouse are long-term personnel too. Different vacation time, all that stuff's got to be added into our formula. So one of my guys might have 2 weeks off, or they have 4 weeks off. So you've got to take that into consideration, because you don't know they could use that whole 4 weeks this year.
Right.
They're entitled to their time off. Luckily, I didn't get hit by COVID as bad as Chief did in Niantic. They had a lot of guys out. They had a couple people out for a month. So unfortunately, we're dealing with this every single day, and to only have a couple guys get COVID and be out long term, we're very lucky. And it could have impacted everybody.
Yeah, it did seem to me that the size differential, between the Niantic, side of the town versus Flanders.
The big thing we've done also this year too is when Jim and I took over, a lot of people talk about the JLL report for the fire study. Everybody has their own opinion about it. Jim and I have this year decided that we've worked very well together. We've actually took the needs of the fire department. I get a call at Flanders, Jim will send a guy. He gets a call on Niantic, I'm sending a guy to help out, just because we don't know the need at the time. Fire study said we didn't work together. To such their own. We work together every day now. A lot of our choices that we make before we make it, Jim and I meet. We probably talk 2 or 3 times a week to make a decision. What you're not going to see in here is the ambulance committee's been stepping up a lot. We're putting part-time EMTs on during the week, Monday through Friday. We're also having to cover the weekend, just to help offset some of the need to keep some of the firemen in the building that the ambulance committee pays for. The ambulance committee pays for IT. They pay for fuels. They pay for 4 sets of gear. They're paying. I didn't use a lot last year in my training budget because the ambulance picked it up.
And they also pay for the overnight firefighters.
They pay for 2 firemen, yeah.
They pay the salary.
So there's a lot of stuff that our budget's not going to address. They pay for all the maintenance on all our ambulances, 100%. Our fire apparatus for our rescues are paying $5,000, I think, in the budget per year for just new stuff and or maintenance, above and beyond. So a lot of our OSHA, a lot of our maintenance, we keep down because the ambulance is offsetting that. I think majority of Jim's budget and mine, I'd say over the last 8 years, have really decreased instead of increased. I didn't add more in this year because I had a problem with our ladder truck last year, and I was able to fix our ladder truck and offset some of the stuff to this year. Next year, I'm going to add my maintenance is going to go up because of all the costs. I'm able to get a lot of my stuff done earlier this year and not let it go. Fire trucks are going up 10%. Anything to do with steel or metal, you're going to be paying a lot more for. So those are going to be expected costs for us next year.
Yeah, I came to almost the opposite conclusion, because if you add up part-time and overtime for Flanders, it's almost equal to straight time. Where if you go to Niantic, part-time plus overtime is quite a bit less than straight time. So I kind of came to a different conclusion than you did.
I was looking more at the overtime, just looking at that overtime.
Yep.
What is built into the system versus what is unexpected. So I'm just trying to get a sense of how you calculate.
And a lot of times what I'll do, what
your
Chief Perone
experience
does, we had the blizzard this week, so we had 37 hours.
Yeah.
Then you have the fire this week, so a lot. Now this week's budget was out of control, but you had the guys there. We had 37 hours for the storm coverage, and then you have some guys working at 8 o'clock in the morning, not getting off to midnight. You can't control it.
I was just going to, and it's come to an overtime because you have to offer it to them first.
Sure.
Is where it's going to be extremely cold, say well below 0, the winds that we've had, or it's going to be a snowstorm. I will put, depending on how bad, it's an educated guess, I will put another person or 2 on to be in that station to make sure that that piece of equipment gets out. Because that kind of weather where somebody coming from home to either get a piece of equipment or get to the scene and get some action going as to what's going on, what the problem is that you're called to solve. I don't want that guy being there alone under those conditions. And I'm a very lucky person. It's worked out. It's worked out.
Just a final, just a thought. Yes, it's pretty apparent in both your budgets that ambulance association subsidies are, definitely, we're keeping costs lower. So that's pretty apparent from what you've written. I know you haven't detailed every aspect of what they're providing, but it's pretty apparent.
Well, for us to buy the ambulance nowadays, it's $300,000. When we bought our rescue at Flanders, they paid for a majority of it. So a lot of these things that aren't seen on paper for this, the ambulance committee's paying for. So they're giving back, our give back is huge a year.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, Roseanne?
I'm all set.
Okay, all set. Chief, thank you. And just to mention too, the night of the storm, Chief, you did call me and told me you were planning on keeping people on overnight. Saturday into Sunday morning, which was, you know, considering roads needed a lot of work. No, that was very good, so, thank you.
Oh, and to that, we had a couple guys at the station, and that morning there was a little snow. I mean, I gotta say, while the snow consistency was very light and it was good to get through, the town crew did a great job. I gotta say that. We went down to Crescent Beach. The park and rec kid that plowed the station did a fabulous job.
Great.
Of course, they kept feeding them hamburgers at Station 2.
Well, if that's what get, you know, it gets the parking lot clean. so-
Whatever it takes.
But they did have a code save. I mean, I believe the gentleman may have passed away eventually, but the fact that he was brought back, and it was a heart attack in the middle of a snowstorm, and we had 4 people to get right there and
Makes a difference.
get going on him, and that made me feel good that
Right.
that decision to hold people over and get people there had been made. So.
And I think too, what, you know, and probably when you, as recommendation made, when you go to Board of Finance, have the calls too. How many times do we, you know, I get the alerts on my phone. York is a very popular place. York's,
Yeah, we ought to go after the state for some money.
well, yeah, okay. Yeah, so anyway, all right, thank you,
So
Chief.
it's easy.
All right, now, Chris, you've kind of already done yours to an extent, but we'll let you finish. So, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. Chris Taylor, Chief of Flanders. Most of my budget's a zero increase. Over the last 8 years has been a zero increase. The only thing that really goes up is salary, which I can't control. It's contractual and or part-time. OSHA budget last year when I took over as chief, I had a problem with our ladder truck. It was like a $13,000 part that broke. It was out of service for approximately 3 months. I was able to move some stuff around in our budget and not come back to the town and ask for more money. That's why I'm able to get stuff done a lot sooner, and I have stuff planned to get repaired. There again, next year when I come back, there will be an increase in our OSHA account and our vehicle maintenance because I'm able to get stuff done and move stuff around it.
Well,
Not come back
it's
to
good
it.
to tell us because next year, you know, that's you've already forecasted
Yeah,
for us.
and we repaired our ladder truck, and now a sensor went on it. So when you look on the computer screen, if you're going right, it looks left. That's a $2,000 sensor. So unfortunately, I can't control it, and for safety, we have to get it fixed. But so stuff like that is unforeseen, and of course, it's just out of date to be repaired. Our OSHA account stayed the same. Our vehicle maintenance has stayed the same. I was keeping some of the numbers under there. Building maintenance we went over with. What we do, and I think Chief Barone does a lot of stuff, that through the Emeralds Committee and our membership, we maintain the building a lot ourselves. This year, our membership wanted to put an awning on our building, $10,000, our membership paid for it. It boosts morale, people enjoy it, we're able to sit out there and have a cheeseburger. But we're upgrading, we had to buy a brand new gear washer this year, $10,000. It looks just like your Samsung dryer or wash machine at home. We pay for that as members. So a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of stuff that we try to offset and not come back to the town for, that we're able to keep our budgets lower. Telephones are telephones. We don't have control of that. That gets taken out by Anna right away. Our fuels, our ambulance committee pays for all the fuels for all the fire apparatus. Not just the ambulances, not the rescue truck, but all the fire trucks. The engines, the ladder trucks, the rescues, everything. The other 2 chief's vehicles too. Uniforms is consistent. It stays the same. It doesn't change unless, you know, it's part of the contract and part of what the agreement we made with the town. IT is whatever number you guys give us, we work out, and the ambulance committee pays for that also too.
Okay. Question for the chief, for Chief Taylor? No? Okay. Everyone's good?
Just so you, real quick, just so you know, I know Mr. Chief Barone brought up, we additionally asked for 2 paid personnel. One of the things myself and Chief Barone did is sit down and figure out what the best need is for not Flanders and not Niantic Fire Department. It's where we have a hole. We truly have a hole, we think, as the chiefs at Station 2, day shift and overnight shift. That's the weak spot right now. There again, we're trying to communicate and talk together and find those little loopholes that everybody keeps bringing up. We are working together better every day. We talk, like I said, 2 or 3 times a week. So if there's anything that we can help you with, let us know. But I know right now we're passing on one, but there is a need. That's all.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. Thank you.
A for class preparation, guys.
What's that?
an A for class preparation.
That's from the teacher.
You finally got it.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Wade, John. John, you're, I think, the first person here tonight. Now you're the last one out, so. Actually, we'll do that next. Remind us next year that you
Yeah,
guys
we
go
can.
first, okay?
That's right.
And we'll make sure of that.
If I'm here.
All right, well, my budget's not that big. Basically, the biggest part of it is the money for part-time fire marshals. With that, and then the reason for our increase is the inspections. It's not just one inspection, it's 2, 3, 4. A lot of times that ends up turning into a research project because of the age of some of the buildings. Not all the codes are the same, depending on when buildings are built. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the recent fire at Flanders Road, which our office is fielding a lot of questions right now that have been directly to the office and also through social media. There's a lot of questions about the systems that are within the building. And a lot of that depends on when the building was built, the codes at the time, and what was required. So we have to go through and examine all that. I have a couple of direct questions that I've received that, but before I answer it, I have to do my research. Fortunately, the building construction and the fire department's actions and time of day were in our favor that night. So it could have been a lot more tragic, I think, if we were at 10 o'clock at night. So again, hats off to the fire department that responded. Obviously, they had, relied on a lot of mutual aid, but also the building construction held it in check. But going with that, with the inspections, we're required by the state to do annual inspections on anything where people sleep. And that's doesn't talk about 1 and 2 family, but 3 family and up. We have several of those within the town. It also includes the hotels and motels, etc. Again, the hours of doing the inspections and then the code research, putting together the report, because when I give you a report, it usually involves cost of money, whether it's maintaining of the sprinkler system, the fire alarms, etc. And obviously, a high point, recently in the news in the past few months, we had the losses in the city of Philadelphia and also in the city of New York. We had loss of life. And a lot of that was attributed to lack of inspections or inspections that were done and then there was no follow-up. The one in the Bronx in the city of New York, there were some fire doors that were identified that did not close and latch. Those fire doors unfortunately made a difference between life and death. And there's been several case histories throughout America's historical fires where that's been the case. As inspectors, when we go through, we try to go through to make sure that those fire doors do close and latch. We have right now going through and working with the schools. I'm sure their budget has gone up because they have close to, I think it's over $300,000 in repairs that needed on their fire doors in at least 2 of the schools. A lot of that has to do with age and abuse. Go through, especially with the bigger kids like the high school, especially in the athletic areas, there's fire doors in those areas. They take a lot of abuse. And unfortunately, they wear out a little bit quicker. Also in there, there's required training as for myself and also for our 2 part-time deputy fire marshals we have to do per year. It ends up adding it's about 30 hours a year per person that we have to maintain for the state. Fortunately, a lot of that with, I guess, a plus of the pandemic, a lot of it is by Zoom, so we're able to do it from the office. We don't have to travel a lot of times. There is some travel cost for some of the training, but the majority we can do from the office, so there is a savings there. With the telephone account, it shows at 4218.
Yeah, we had talked about that.
We did talk about it. So that's we're gonna stay with the original number, what it was the year before at the 2,110. We have the 2 phones in the office, and then we've just added the improvements in the new building for our cell coverage. So between our cell phones and the office phones, we're gonna keep that number the same. So that'll be a reduction.
A little bit, yeah.
Training has gone down a little bit. Basically, it's our, as far as purchasing materials. Last year, because of the pandemic, the codes did not change. We do anticipate from talking to the State Fire Marshal's office that in the fall of this year, we're going to change codes, which means purchasing of books. We're trying to use as much online as possible. It's cheaper to use that, but again, it all comes because even when a code is passed, Connecticut passes special amendments. So for certain things, they may add or delete something. So we have to have the codes that reference Connecticut only. Uniforms, like everything else, everything has gone up, and try to go through and for when we do have a deputy or something, as far as what it costs, actually put them in, safety shoes, reflective apparel, protective clothing, when we do a fire investigation. So we try to go through every one of those. That's how that number was developed. Miscellaneous supplies, with the move to the new building and basically complete separation from emergency management, this was our best guess as far as the amount for supplies, paper clips, etc. So it's kind of a guess at this point. I expect to maintain that. And also included that is for a printer and like ink cartridges and supplies. We're working with
Yeah. The printer finally has.
with the IT,
Yeah.
because part of our stuff is out of IT, and we're working through that as well.
One thing too, the 75, they're going to have to come back for a little bit of money this year for the part-time fire marshals, because they are going to exceed what's budgeted, which is why I support fully going up to the 75. And I think, as the fire marshal really pointed out, we have all these now. We have HEPA, we have people, and we absolutely have to make sure they're well inspected. So, anyway, that's my comments. Any questions, Bill?
Well, that led into my question, is what the current, because I know the narrative said that you wanted 95,000 initially, and you were negotiated down to 75. So year-to-date now is closer to 75?
Yeah, we'll be in that vicinity into, and as here again, especially with the emergency service, if the need is there, we'll obviously
Yeah.
take care of it.
And there's no fee for these inspections, right?
Not currently, no.
There's no revenue, so I wouldn't think that you'd want to charge people, because then they're
No,
going to be more likely to...
the tough part about that, and I could say that obviously with the current condition of the economy, the cost that the building owners have to pay just for their maintenance services, like if it's a restaurant, to pay for sprinkler systems, fire alarms, kitchen cleaning, and along with our inspections, what we're finding is, unfortunately, there's a lot of contractors do very shoddy work. I'll use the restaurant industry. Probably at least 90% of the restaurants that we do, we go and inspect their kitchen hood exhaust system. I have to tell them that their vendor has to come back and clean because it's not clean. Still contains grease and everything else. And I tell them that you really should ask for either a refund or a free cleaning because it's not done. Again, this is all stuff that has to be done through them, because a lot of the contractors do push back. And, we've told them, listen, they have to come back, otherwise we're not going to sign your permit to open. And that's kind of where we are. For the town to charge a fee, I think that would meet a lot of resistance. And I don't want to be put in that position, because when I can tell you now, when I walk through the door, they're already seeing dollar signs come out of their pockets because it's the cost of maintenance. I don't have a big fan club. The guys with the big red trucks, they have a lot of fans. I don't get many Christmas cards, trust me.
Yeah. Any other questions, Bill? Ann?
Yeah, just quickly, you mentioned the revised code for 22, the fire and safety
Yep.
code. So how frequently is that code updated? Because
Usually it's every 2 to 4 years.
Okay.
The pandemic extended it. Connecticut, I think, is going to start doing it a little more frequently. A lot of this stuff, like news right now, when we look at a building's fire alarm system, we're looking at the national standard code is a 2013 version.
Okay.
It's way behind the times. A lot of technology has changed, and we can only enforce what the state has adopted. But we're kind of caught in the middle. You can use a more recent code, but that involves more research for us to make sure that, because sometimes just because it's newer doesn't mean it still follows the code. So there's a lot of unfortunate research that's to be done on our part of it. It's not just using the latest number.
Okay, thanks.
Dan?
I'm good.
Roseanne?
All set, thank you.
Okay. John, thank you very much. Very nice
Thank you.
presentation, too. Okay. All right, that completes our presentations for this evening, and since it's a special one, we can't add to it, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
It's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, and have a good evening, everyone.